I had to mute you out. No talking, but you're on the same channel as our intro, so just don't say anything. Nobody can hear me right now. Don't worry.
No
I'm not
probs.
supposed to, at least. Just stand by because you weren't.
No
Okay.
probs.
Welcome, everybody, friends, folks, foes, and fellow pirate mateys to this week's latest installment of World Pirate Radio Live. It's World, well, one would think by listening to that introduction, and this is the first time that's ever happened, as a matter of fact, but it's not World Pirate Radio News. We are actually hosting Pirate Radio Podcasts, show number 188. Gotta love those double eights. Our guest this go-round as well, too, let's not forget to mention, is, I see how this, wow. These are the sort of things that happen when you're in a bit of a rush, I suppose, but we can quickly remedy what has occurred here, the snafu, essentially. Self, of course, as always, the Rob. We set on her pn.com. Sign up is via email, pirate1radio@protonmail.com. That's how you can better become involved or engaged, as we like to put it here. Can be used for PayPal donations. We have got a Patreon account in place as well. Don't forget, simply, if you'd like to support us, to like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit the notification button where you find it. We have a Teespring store in place now too. Development and the like. Web tech help as well too would very much be appreciated. Along with just any other way that you could, using your imagination, want to potentially become involved with the wider network. Katie Kamara, yes. We had her here actually a couple weeks ago for a bit of a teaser. No pun intended, given the fact that I just recently, it had been drawn to my attention a while back, but just last night as I was going over our notes here with respect to her biography, compared by some, I'm not sure, like to find out here, however, as being potentially the next J.K. Rowling of erotica. So, yeah, teaser indeed. A couple weeks ago when she dropped in for our Tuesday night news event. I think mostly this comes as a result, this comparison to being the next J.K. Rowling of erotica, among many other things, of course, too. She is a woman of many talents, someone who wears a whole multitude of hats, but one of the book anthologies she's best known for is the Velvet Rope Erotica. So we'll be able to hear more from her on this in just a moment or two. I know we did have her plugged in just a couple minutes ago during the brief pre-interview we had. Katie, I know you're going to be coming at us with an Australian accent, although Washington, D.C. is where you yourself are calling home these days. Are you still with us?
I certainly am, Japhy. How are you?
You know, she had actually been No, she was. She'll find it eventually here. You're muted out right now, Katie, is what we're seeing
I
here from this end. So
I'm
just
actually right here.
have to remedy that from your end, and we should be good to go. Clicking on the unmute button.
I am certainly here.
Skype, of course. But before she does that, let's also remember to thank everyone who has dropped by and joined us this week. Hope things are going as well as one could potentially hope for, given the extraordinary set of circumstances we continue to find ourselves in over the course of this essentially New World Order hijacking of the free world under the guise of this corona apocalypse hoax, essentially, is how I'm personally starting to see things after having weighed all the facts as they are. But we'll maybe turn our sights more to that either later in the interview or during our next upcoming news night. Katie, it looks like you've managed to...
Yes, I'm here.
Unmute yourself. Hey, that's
Hey.
great. So the next J.K. Rowling of erotica, yeah, I just thought, given the fact, well, it was a teaser that you gave us a couple of weeks ago there.
Yes,
so.
it was. Yes, it was indeed. In fact, there's actually a story behind that. I started my career 8 years ago. I have done multiple, a multitude of different careers in my lifetime, well, in my young lifetime, I'll put it that way. When I wrote my book, funny enough, it's a once in a lifetime event that you are picked up pre-publishing by a executive, Hollywood executives and story producers alike. My book was found, it was read by the likes of Ryan Seacrest. It was read by a story producer, Michael McGuinness, who is well known for being a producer on the Desperate Housewives of New York. They actually asked me at the time to write a 6-episode, 40-minute script based on all of my work, to be invited from Australia to come to the United States, to the Beverly Hills Hotel, to organize an executive meeting with Hollywood executives to schedule a script pitch to basically turn my TV show turn my book into a TV show. Back then, I didn't know how to write a script. I was just an amateur writer. If I backtrack a little bit further, I put my work into an anthology competition, I should say, and that was in Melbourne by an underground publisher called Robin Hood Press. No, that was the American one actually, but a publisher in Melbourne, and they had said, you know what, we absolutely love your work. Only one problem: your work is too explicit. And your work is only good for the United States because the United States is the home of porn. That's pretty much how they did it. And they said that that because my book was so explicit, they would be more than willing. The chief of editor, who was in charge at the time, who was looking at all my work, said, you know what, I'm going to write you a referral letter and you can go and start your career over in the United States. So here I am. And so it took me a long time to do that. Only one problem, though, is because I had been taught by the Michael McGuinness to actually taught how to pitch to Hollywood. So I've been taught all of that. We spent countless hours on the phone when I was back in Australia, learning the ropes of Hollywood and how to talk to these executives who are quite, brutal. And, of course, I got to talk to Ryan Seacrest at the time. I was endorsed by Christina Ricci, And she even pointed out that she would be more than happy to play a key role if the TV series would ever eventuate. Only one problem, though, is that, again, I couldn't write a script. And so it was sitting on the back burner all this time. And, of course, I was told specifically that they were looking for a TV show that was kind of dark, erotic, and there hadn't been one that was big or on the TV scene since, 1980s, 1970s. That was true, put it that way. Back in 2012 was around the time of 50 Shades of Grey. That was when the popularity was growing for 50 Shades of Grey. And, of course, my work is not compared to 50 Shades of Grey. And, of course, Hollywood producers said that your work is not to be compared. Your work is a little bit more out there. It's penthouse quality. So basically, I've skipped the romance and go straight for it is what it is. And I became popular in it. And by doing that, you know what? All of these 8 years on, I'm kicking my butt about it because the TV show that actually took my place was American Horror Story. And so here I am, like going, wow, I could have had an opportunity of a lifetime and didn't get that far. And, of course, when I talk about this all the time, and it's like, your work is really, really good. And it's like, yeah, I know. I've been recognized as the next J.K. Rowling of erotica. The only thing is I didn't fight for it, and I didn't go ahead and pursue it. But a year later, I decided, you know what? I don't want to be known as an erotic author because, you know, erotica comes with its own, stimulant, put it that way, and every man would come after me, and I didn't want to be recognized as someone that just, you know, is open, but I didn't want to be known as someone that was just, you know, able to be grabbed, if that makes sense. So I went ahead and I incorporated spirituality and philosophy, eroticism through tantra, romance. I basically came up with the philosophy that three separate topics could be interlinked by the promotion of self-help and how to go back to basics of, you know, what is an old school romance, or what is the back to basics of having a relationship. Without intimacy, there's no love. Without the possibility of having a relationship, it seems life could be, you know, impossible. So with all of that combined, I then started talking about, you know, what is a nucleus of a family? What is a nucleus of a good marriage? And then combining that with spirituality. How do you have a proper relationship with your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever? And so I started with that, and at 7 o'clock every single morning on East Coast time, the United States, because back then I was well known on Facebook. I was shut down and censored by Facebook for being too explicit and too vocal. I lost thousands and thousands of fans that were gravitating towards what I was doing. Not just erotica, but just, you know, this motivation, inspiration. I started writing multitudes, like hundreds of quotes, original quotes that are written by me. And of course, those got promoted a hell of a lot. And like I said, I don't know why Facebook shut me down. One of my first ever quotes that I ever wrote is, if I can chase one tear away from you, if I can make you smile, if I can light a candle of hope in your heart, and if I can remind you that all of life adores you, and if I can shine a light on the darkness that surrounds you, then I have loved just as God loved. I am satisfied. And so I went from the Velvet Rope erotica to the Velvet Rope wisdom, and I started incorporating everything that entails what, you know, the human experience is, to the point where I fast forward 8 years on, actually about 12 months ago, you know what, I decided I'm going to go ahead and get credentials in it. And then from there, I formulated what is now known as Soma Fusion. Soma Fusion, Mind, Body, and Soul. I have a business in it. I am credentialed as a multidisciplinary in psychology and alternative therapies, meaning that I'm not just a life coach, but I'm also a therapist. So, hence the multidisciplinary. So with that, I have started a business and I've been growing an empire, which is leading me into basically what I call the tree of life. And so there are multiple opportunities, and I've never been one to hold back in terms of what the human potential really is all about, and incorporating the human experience for those who are down and out and can't figure out wade their way through the muck. So, and with that, over the years, I got into learning other stuff. I started a publishing company. I also got into radio. I got into doing video production. I am a woman with so many talents that half of the time I don't even know what to do with them. And a lot of people will call me successful, but I don't see myself as successful because I'm going to keep doing what I do for the rest of my life. And, success speaks in various different ways. But the other thing is, too, is that if we're not walking our walk and talking our talk, then how can we ourselves be called successful and be satisfied with that?
Mm-hmm. How can we be called authentic? I think that's the way
That's another way.
I would definitely put it more just to the point. Now you talk about the muck, as it were, tantra, and so forth, all the sexual energy and transforming it. Really, to me, I'm thinking that as humans, sexual creatures that we are, we can all relate to the genital area and attraction things that we find attractive. People primarily, let's say, just keep it on that level. Although some people
it's
get pretty freaky with their appetites and desires. I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said it's you got to remember that too. That Tantra is not all about sex. Tantra is all about the spiritual connection between two or more bodies. Tantra means the exploration and of the human experience. Tantra is not, like I said, most people just assume that Tantra is Tantra because you are relating it to tantric sex, which is actually, it can be seen as New Age, like the Kundalini energy. But the going back to Tantra in Hinduism is more about the connection, the energy that can be shared between two or more people. Most people will see it two people, but basically how we can connect with somebody on a deeper level, rather than just see sex for what it is. So it can be equated to sex magic. So, it's not just about the romance. It's not just about what sex entails. It's about everything around it. So it's the experience, put it that way.
Yeah, I get that. And I think, and that's just coming at things from a very novice type perspective and approach as well too. I'm imagining, we've got a number of people join us here via Facebook, YouTube, and DLive, as is typically the case. James Melbourne, Randy G. Whalen, Jane E. Walker. We've got problems here with Facebook in being a number of things, with the browser being able to actually view what is taking place without being cut off. And there's so many different issues. And the fact that comments are posted and don't show up for hours sometimes when we do these live streams for some strange reason. So our apologies, folks, if we don't get to you right away after you've posted your comments, as we like to do. We prefer to be there in the moment and right on the ball. That's just the way. That's what's happening here with Fakebook, unfortunately. Don't forget, you can call into Skype as well too. My personal ID is simply Japhy, Japhy .Ryder, RYDER 89, and we could probably field a few calls if not just simply comments. Of course, Jason LeBlanc dropping in as well here too, so I'm sure we'll be able to hear a little bit more from them here eventually. If they do have any thoughts, comments, or questions, certainly more than welcome to fire away. Joey Boomer, Dana Shiver over on YouTube as well too, so that's great to see. But yeah, Tantra, I've been a pretty lazy Buddhist type character the past nearly 25 years or so, and Tantra is one of those things which I definitely look at it in the sense of completion of the circuit, but also from the sense that we can almost, I don't know if I'm mistaken in this sense, but Carl Jung's this concept of individuation, the anima and animus, the male within the female, and vice versa, female within the male, completion of the circuit, and the flow of energy in a healthy, optimal, holistic fashion. That's really one of our most primary goals as humans here on this earth, as I understand it, essentially. But you talked about the muck earlier, and in the Buddhist tradition, there is the many will be familiar with the lotus flowers is what it's known as, quite simply. And the idea there is that we all dwell in the muck, and to obtain and to rise to the level and experience enlightenment in its fullest and most real fashion, that we have to transform that muck. The Vajra or Tantric tradition, I do believe, has a lot to do with transformation of energy. So we have that muck is all around us. It's inevitable, it's inescapable, but the transformative approach, that end of things, is really quite critical. Are you familiar with that at all, or is there anything perhaps?
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
The correct word you probably need to use is transmutation. It's not really, it's not usually a word that most people would use, but transmutation is the transmuting of energies from positive to negative to positive, and using those energies for good. So kind of like the lotus flower. A lot of people see Tantra as a way to ascend. There are other opportunities, be one with God. There are many of other ways to transmute energies, and that is through, like I said, if you were to convey the equivalent of sex magic, which is the same to procreate, it's also there to connect. It's also there to lift your own heights. But yeah, you're raising your own heights to levels that your mind cannot comprehend, but your body can. So the lotus flower, there are many different symbols. The lotus flower is one of them. You've also got, what's another one? You've also got the, I think that it starts with an M. The name is forgotten. I totally forgot the name.
Mandela?
No. Methida? I'll think of it soon. If I remember it, I'll tell you.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but that's more Hindu rather than Buddhist.
Ah.
So,
It's interesting. Buddhism itself, according to Alan Watts, was a stripped down form of Hinduism uh, designed for exportation, essentially. To it was the whole the India, rather Buddhism was lost to the West for over 1,000 years, at least. Completely forgotten about and hidden in the jungles of northern India. I'm not sure if you know the story or not, but I could send you a link to
sure.
a documentary or two on YouTube. It's just fascinating. And for me, this really is the age of apocalypse. And so much of what we're witnessing now, this endless order out of chaos business, which is, I'm not sure how healthy that is and who's really profiting, whose interests are at play and at stake ultimately. But hashtag cui bono. But this the northern India, lost in the jungles, these ancient temples and the like that were discovered around the mid to late 19th century by these British engineers, surveyors, and so forth, because of course that was the time of British Empire throughout what they call it, the Indian subcontinent.
Mm-hmm.
So fascinating stuff. And this is really, I'm just endlessly intrigued by this whole business of East meeting West, going right back to the time of Alexander the Great. And then, of course, you had this character named Chandragupta, who was the grandfather of Ashoka the Great. But, the University of Nalanda, and the way that so much the Tibetan tradition, that they help to safeguard so much of what potentially could have been lost because of the subsequent Islamic rampaging and destruction that they embarked upon throughout India when they invaded back during, what was that, the 8th century, somewhere in that area. But transmutation, and just for me personally, I think, and for you as well too, is what it sounds like on your journey, this raising of the vibration, transmutation of this lower chakra energy up through the spinal column, mm-hmm. to the heart, and ultimately the crown chakra. That's where I really come at things from. I don't know how successful I am, but that's my whole approach and philosophy when we do these live streams, that I'm sending as much of that purified, saintly, if you will, almost who would ever stop to think that pirates could be saints. So stranger things have been known to happen, I suppose. But that's the goal. That's the because when I leave this world, as we all do, just passing on through, that I want to make sure that I haven't really wasted my time as far as doing what I could to reach out and help others when the opportunity had presented itself. And this is what sounds like from your end of things too, Katie, is the point where you currently are at. You've come through a lot over the past number of years, I guess. You're a survivor and someone who has had to endure, I'm not sure the extent of it exactly, but some trauma and suffering in its some of its worst forms, unfortunately. I don't even really know how much you want to get into it, but the floor is yours if you'd like. I know there's a lot of people out there who have experienced similar situations. That's for damn sure. And so maybe what you have to share with them could find itself ultimately helpful and empowering. So
sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
For me, I've done a lot of private interviews that have been spotlighted over the last 12 months. And this is more so in my awakening in terms of spirituality. I am a survivor of well, I, I could say 2.5 decades. I've been through domestic violence, child abuse, sexual abuse, that started really from childhood. Um, so you're this is I've been through stages of my entire life. Not everything is all bad, but those experiences have led me to, at the age of 17, dedicate my life to humanity, in helping people that have been through trauma throughout their lives, in order to elevate them and say, there is hope. Um, the other thing is too is that not everything is all bad. There are people out there that are willing to help others. In terms of my trauma, there were certain situations that conflicted. Well, I was afflicted by, that led me to have broken bones, bruises all over my body. There were, it took me a long time to figure out why things were happening, and it was under the guidance of a psychologist that had to explain to me that no, nothing was actually my fault. In fact, they were projections of another person's emotion. And so I was always seen as somebody that was the black sheep of the family. I was somebody who was very, very, you know, different completely in terms of the way I think, my perspective on life. It's taken me a long time to get to that stage where you mature enough to understand what life is really about and how to cope with that. And that's where it comes. My resilience for life is me completely just fighting for everything that I have. And that resilience has led me to be able to adapt in life much more quickly than a normal person would have. But I mean, like I said, that's not going without the help that I've received over the years as well. In terms of my childhood, though, there were certain occasions, and this is why I backed out of religion and become more spiritual. I am, in fact, an omniist, so I believe in a multitude of religions and beliefs, but never accept a religion as one religion as my own. I believe that there's value and truths in everything. So that's why I don't hold back in terms of expressing myself, and whether it would be from, just generally expressing myself, or even my sexuality. That's, because it's human instinct. But at the same time, when I was younger, I didn't understand half of this stuff, and I was put into vulnerable situations where I couldn't. I was always controlled to a level where I couldn't cope, and I was sent to what everyone would assume to know as Bible study classes. Normally reserved at a young age for children on Sunday school kind of thing. And I was sent twice a week to a pastor and his wife, to not because I had to learn the word of the Lord, or the Bible, so to speak, but because it was a form of punishment, because everything that I did in my life was wrong. And so that was, and it wasn't until my mid-teens that I went, you know what, enough's enough. I can't cope with this anymore. I can't go through beatings on a daily basis. I can't, because at the age of 11, I was made to pay rent in my own family's home. So, when it comes to, the dread of life, and learning the hard way. I've had to learn the hard way because I had no one there for me to support me in being by myself, in coping with everything that I went through. And of course, it becomes a generational thing because my mother is also a therapist. And she didn't become a therapist because, she wanted to become a therapist. She became a therapist because she had her trauma experiences as well. And one of her, I won't go into her story at all, but it is public. But uh, but I will say that one of her biggest causes is sex trafficking. And so her and I have had huge bouts of experience that we offer as therapists, as counselors, as coaches, to people who are finding themselves, just hard done by. They don't know how to cope. They don't know how to empower themselves because they think that they're alone, and so it causes all sorts of chaos. And for me, when I was 18 years old, I tried to attempt suicide because I couldn't cope with anything. I went to work one day and I was a kitchen hand at an international airport, and I picked up a knife, and you know what? I turned around and I said, what? I can't do this. I did the right thing. In all of my emotion, I did the right thing, and I went to my boss and I said, I need to go home. And they let me home. They sent me home, and I went on a, they took, I was in an airport, so they took me on a shuttle and said, you know what, take all the time you need. And so I didn't enter back in that kitchen. I think it was about, a couple of weeks before I re-entered back into my job. But, I went through all of that. I've had a second attempted suicide. So it's taken, for me, when I was, back in my early 20s, I had cognitive behavioral therapy for myself. And that is what's tremendously helped me, because I was able to get rid of certain trigger words that were negatively influencing me to cause an emotional breakdown. And so I went into that period wherein certain words you could say, you could be standing right in front of me and you could mention a host of words and I'd be just all beside myself. I wouldn't be emotionally uncontrollable. But with all of that said, there's not one type. And I'm being real about this. There's not one type of abuse, call it what you will, that I've not experienced that is short of a gun. So in terms of female empowerment, I am right there for men and women who just find themselves unable to rise and not shed their traumas, but deal with their traumas in such a way that they can have and lead a positive life. Because just because you've been through a trauma, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. There is so much opportunity and so many groups of empowerment that you can get into. There are causes that you can get into that are all there for men and for women. I only speak for me because, one, I'm a woman, and two, I do work with a lot of women. But my work is not all about trauma. I can only base my own experiences and through my maturity and my wisdom, my knowledge about it, that I can openly speak about it. But, in terms of sexual abuse, I'm not going to go into depth about that. But it changed. But it didn't change, when I started writing erotica, a lot of people in my family said, you shouldn't be writing that. You should not do that. You're the devil. They called me every word under the sun. And it's because they knew of the sexual traumas that I'd been through. They thought that I was using it as a form of an addiction, but it wasn't. It was just me expressing my sexuality and, you know, breaking it down as gently as possible for people that were repressed. And, you know, it's only natural that sexuality, you know, in a lot of people has been, you know, it's a caged thing. You know, people, it's like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. This kind of stuff happens behind closed doors. But the thing is that there's light at the end of the tunnel.